So the hope is that as we recount his story, our hearts would within us burn, that there would be an evoking of the soul within us, the eternal, immortal soul that God has made that responds with joy to the Christmas story. So we have now a little short sermon, hopefully explaining something of why it is that Jesus came to earth. Christmas is like normal life, but better. It's better food, and we normally achieve that by adding bacon to things. We take turkey and we wrap it in bacon. We take sausages and we wrap them in bacon. And we take sprouts, and if you're lucky, we pepper them also with bacon. It's spending time with family, but you get to spend time with more family and in one place. It's enjoying the kindness of your family and friends, but even better is on Christmas Day you receive presents. And it's enjoying time, but rather than having to spend time at work and at school and studying, we get to spend time resting and having fun. Christmas is like normal life, but better. Except it was the opposite for Jesus. He was born, but before he came, he was as happy as anybody could be. He was never tired, he was never frightened, and he was never sad. Jesus had never even felt the pain of a grazed knee. And yet from the first breath that he drew as he was born, he felt the chill of the air on his cold skin. He never felt cold, he never felt heat. He felt cold for the first time. He had the discomfort of soggy nappies. Our little John is prone to nappy rash, gets terribly uncomfortable when he does what Anna calls stealth poos. He doesn't tell us, and then the soreness sets in, he's uncomfortable. Jesus had the discomfort of soggy nappies, the discomfort of trapped wind. He needed cuddles. He needed the cuddles, the affection of his mom and dad. All babies need affection. Without it, they don't prosper, they don't grow well. Jesus needed cuddles. Even though he had made the world and though he cares for the world, he needed the affection. He needed the care of his parents. He depended upon man, though all of men depend upon him. And as he grew, it only got worse. The body that he'd taken to himself would be spit upon. He'd be hit. And his hands and his feet would be nailed to the cross. Christmas for Jesus was not life but better. It was life but so much worse. And yet, as with necessary parts of Christmas for us, this wasn't absolutely necessary for Jesus. He didn't have to come, he wanted to come. And there are things that you do at Christmas amidst all of the joy that you probably don't enjoy that much. There's sometimes the one family member, you have to have him come around or her. You don't really want to spend time with them, but you are obliged, it's your duty. When I was a little boy, for me it was the family kiss. The relatives would come, and there was one unnamed relative who had a sloppy and bristle-filled kiss, and I had to line up and brace myself to kiss the mouth of the unnamed relative. It was a moment of deep discomfort and unhappiness, but it was my duty. But that wasn't the case for Jesus. His Christmas was made worse, but it wasn't his duty. He came freely, he came willingly, he wanted to come. He wanted his life, in a sense, to be worse than it was before he came. Why would he do such a thing? Well, he did it in love, he did it in kindness, and he did it in pity. Jesus remembered how things were at the beginning in the creation. He remembered the mountaintop paradise. He remembered the garden that he'd planted that was filled of plants and trees and flowers and of animals. And man, had he not fallen, could have lived in lovely community with one another and with the animals, and they wouldn't have been any threat to him, and he would have lived in friendship and peace with God. When God had made us, he made us to be happy. He made us in order that he would bless us, that he would share his infinite joy with us. in the beauty of the creation that he'd made. And there are still echoes of that. We still enjoy life. We still enjoy the beauty of creation. We still enjoy community and family. But something has happened. Something's gone wrong. And it's a time that is mixed joy with sorrow, happiness with grief. You see, he remembers how things used to be, but he also remembers the painful rejection of him. And that's what happened in the garden. He decorated this beautiful garden as a house to live in with mankind, to be to us a friend. And yet when he said, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what he was really saying is love me as I have loved you. Be faithful to me as I have been faithful to you. But of course, we rejected his love. That garden was full of all good things, but we chose to take of the fruit. And so the sentence that he had warned us of fell upon mankind, death, and he drove us out of the garden. You'll notice that man didn't die immediately in our reading. The reason is because death is best defined as separation from friendship with God. Our life, our full and joyful and blessed life is found when we live in friendship and communion with God. And so to be driven from the mountaintop and down into the valley of our fallenness was a living death, and it was followed by a physical death. He remembers how things were for us, and he remembers the way that we painfully rejected him. He remembers all too well how he kicked us out of his house, out of the garden, and down into the valley. And you might think, well, that's a bit harsh, God. But you would do the same thing. If you invited some young punk from the streets into your home, and they began threatening your children, breaking their toys and trashing your home, you just couldn't live with them. You would drive them out lest they ruined the very house that you'd brought them into, that you'd welcomed them into. And yet at the same time, you might also then look out of your window and see that rebellious child, angry and frustrated, but also hurting and unloved and alone. And you might have compassion on them. I think we all do that. You're out where we used to live. It was an estate, and there'd be little children out on their bikes, 10 o'clock at night, nobody to look after them, and we just felt terribly sorry and sad for them. And this is what Jesus does. Though we reject his love, though we are driven from the mountainside down into the valley of our own making, that valley of sorrow and grief, he looks upon us and he has pity and compassion, and he loves us, and he wants to do something about that. He wants to restore us to an Eden-like existence, but he can't take us as we are. And when you look out at those young people, you can't take them as they are. If you were to bring them again into your home, they'd be a threat to your family. You know, you see somebody who hasn't been loved, who hasn't had a father, and they just bring destruction to everything they touch. And in a sense, some of it's not their fault, and you want to be kind, but what are you going to do? Bring them into your house and let them bring destruction to your children and to your family? You can't do that. And so what are you going to do about it? There's also the problem of the already hurting community that they've offended. For those who live locally, and you're on Facebook, you'll see that we've been terrorized, our streets, by a gang of 20, 30 youths who are going out and they're stealing wreaths from front doors, and they're throwing eggs at windows. And at Halloween, they smashed the pumpkins. And they're also breaking into sheds and garages, and they're stealing children's toys, tearaways. And on Facebook, there was this thread, and everybody was saying, you know, what a disgrace. We've got to do something about this. We need the community police to be involved. We need something to be done. There was one kind-hearted soul who said, but these people they just need more stuff. It's our fault. We need to create community programs and play spaces, and then they wouldn't be so terrible. And immediately the retort came from somebody else. Well, it's a shame you couldn't have the same compassion for the 20 people whose houses have been violated by the offender. And both sides of that are right. It's right to be compassionate. It's right to want to set things right. But there needs to be a sense of justice. The community needs to be won over and appeased. And so what could you do? You look out at the house there as this hurting, unloved, but angry and difficult youth. You want to make their lives better. So what do? Well, you could first go out with them and for them and on their behalf. And you could go around to all of the offended neighbors and you could say, look, whatever damage they've done, whatever the cleaning bill, I'll pay the cost for them. And then you could engage in the kind of community endeavors that they've failed to engage in. Go out and tidy up the park, clean up the shop fronts, tidy up people's gardens, all on their behalf, in order that the community's hearts would again be warmed and their affection restored to the rebellious youth. And in that act of you going out, you paying their debts, you working on their behalf, what you do is you restore their reputation, you restore their status in community, but hopefully also, as you do that, your unmerited kindness speaks to that life. Your enabling and your example shows to that youth a better way to live. And with that, they're finally ready to come into your home and to be received in love and for you to enjoy that relationship with them, except you probably wouldn't do it. It sounds like a lot of work. And often, you put a lot of time and energy into people who are troubled and you don't get anything back. You all have family members like that, people that you've poured yourself into, but you seem to get nowhere. And so eventually you give up. But God didn't give up. This is exactly what Jesus did in the incarnation. He came down as one of us. He took a human body. He put on the costume, the disguise of humanity, though it was a true humanity. And he went out on our behalf and he began paying the debts. Remember, the consequence in the garden was death. He came to pay the debt for a number of souls which cannot be numbered, like the stars of the heaven and like the sand down on Roker Beach. But how was he to ever pay this debt? Well, he paid with the priceless worth of his divine nature through the mortal body that he had taken to himself. That body that felt the cold chill, that had the cramps, that had the wind pains, would be offered up as a sacrifice to appease the justice of God, to set things right in the cosmic community, to declare that justice has been done at the same time as grace. He comes alongside us as our representative, and he begins restoring the favor of the one whose favor we have lost. And so he takes his life, his service of truth, of mercy, of compassion, of righteousness, and he wins back the favor of the Almighty who has been offended, so that he might not only afford to you a status and reputation, clearing your guilt, saying, look, this one is exactly as they should be because I have done exactly what they should have done, but also through his example and through his enabling, through the power of his resurrection, he shows to us a better way of living, so that not only is the reputation restored, but he communicates by faith the life of resurrection. His Easter glory is given to those who have faith, so that they, though dead, separated from God, would come again into friendship with God and begin living the life that God had called them to live, in order that what? That they might be brought again to this home that God had made to enjoy with them. He came in order to restore to us a lost world. He came in order to repair a broken friendship with God. All of this he did for us. The manger, the coming of the Son of God in the flesh, is always overshadowed by the cross. But the shadow of the cross is cast through the glory of resurrection, through new life and through a new world and through a new hope which is offered to mankind. And it's for this reason that the angels, when Jesus is born and as he's laying in the manger, all of the angels in the heavens sing out, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to those who have found favor with God, though peace doesn't immediately come. Peace still hasn't come in all of its fullness, but what they recognize is that his coming down is the beginning of the inevitable elevation of man back into glory, back into life, back into blessing with God. Now I say inevitable elevation, and that is true for the category of mankind. But for each and every individual that makes up the category of mankind, how are they to enter into this new life? How are they to be forgiven? How are they to be reconciled to God and prepared for the new Eden that is coming, where there's no death, there's no suffering, and there's no pain? They are to do so by responding to the Christmas message with faith. Christmas is not something we do once a year. The carols must not be songs that we sing once a year. What is held out to us in the Christmas story is everlasting life of new creation, of a joy that maybe you have never experienced, but you will experience if you respond to the message with faith. But faith is not an act. Faith is a relationship. For many of us here, we have begun that journey, and we have begun to experience the peace of God, friendship again with God in our lives. And it's given us something that those who are without just haven't experienced and couldn't imagine. And yet, every time we hear these stories of the Son who became a baby, God is extending that peace to you. And what I want to encourage you to do is either to begin the journey of faith or to recommit yourself to the journey of faith. Notice that the birth account ends with the celebration of the angels. It ends with worship. The shepherds, having seen the baby go away, and they worship God. You see, the salvation story is not about the salvation of man. The birth of Jesus is not about the saving of sinners' souls, the restoring of sinners to a new Eden and to a paradise. The story of the incarnation is about the worship of God. That's why Jesus has come ultimately, because we previously could not see who he was. We looked down to the earth, our faces sunk down in shame, but he, having come down, has lifted up our faces to see the God that we have ignored and rejected, and to see that he is a gracious, a loving, a blessed God who has come to restore paradise to us. And so I want to encourage you to begin that journey of faith, to continue the journey of faith. And one of the ways we do that is by gathering to worship him. And that happens on one day in 7/1 he is appointed for his worship. It's not okay and it's not enough to be joyful once a year or twice at Easter. We need to enter into a life of worship, a life of friendship with God. And you do that, and you will discover an otherworldly peace and a hope for a world that is so much better than our own. We worship here every Sunday at 10:30, 5 o'clock. You are very welcome to join us on our journey of faith, in our life of worship, or anywhere else is fine too, but we mustn't pass on this opportunity. Remember tomorrow, as you enjoy normal life, but better, that for Jesus, it wasn't normal life, but better. It was normal life, but so much worse. But he did so because he loves you and because he wants to be your friend. And all that is required of you is a response of love and a following after Jesus. And so begin following Jesus this Christmas. Continue following Jesus this Christmas. Recommit yourself to following Jesus this Christmas.